Hi, and welcome to the last video regarding Docker here at the Hivelocity knowledge base. So you can see that I have a terminal open and I have a web browser open. On the web browser is the official Docker reference documentation. And the reason I have this up is that I want to mention real quick how useful this is when learning about Docker and working with it. It has reference for everything within a compose file. You can see here are all of our parameters over here to the right. And if we look up here, we've also got all the different commands we can use in Docker and all their different tags and flags and all that fun stuff. And this is straight from the Docker development team. So you can rest easy knowing that everything in here is accurate and will work in Docker. Now, pointing our attention back to the terminal to the left, we've got our Docker compose file. And this is the same one we've been working with in other articles. And you can see we have our two services at the bottom here, and that's our actual Ghost web app and the database that's talking to Ghost. And both of them share the same network so they can talk to each other. And this 8080 over here is on the host. So I'll be able to type that 8080 in the web browser in a second to actually view our Ghost application. So if I go ahead and just spin these up real quick, you can see it'll create a network and it'll also create the two containers. Now, I already created the volume earlier and I already pulled the images, but normally you would also create the volume and pull and extract the images as well. Now, we can go ahead and take a look already to the site that'll about to appear. And you can see it's saying that we'll be right back because it's probably initializing the database. But if we go to Docker logs, it'll tell us exactly where it is. And I bet it's probably up by now. Yep. So there we go. We have a website in what, less than 30 seconds. And a really neat thing about that logs command is that it'll give us a lot of useful information. Like, let's say, for example, I go over here and our password that we defined is inaccurate and we rebuild the container. Oh, wait, there we go. It'll recreate the database. And when we refresh, when it says done in a moment, well, it's having an issue, isn't it? We go to Docker logs ghost again. Wow. Well, that tells us kind of exactly what happened, didn't it? Connection refused from 172.20.0.2. Now, what could that be? Let's take a look. We can look at our Docker networks with the Docker network ls command. And there you can see right here, we have our Docker article network. And if I run Docker network inspect Docker, and we'll just tab that to autocomplete. Well, 172.20.0.2, that's our database container. And if I run Docker logs db, we can see that it's ready for connections and there's nothing wrong with the database. So we know that we were able to very quickly determine the cause for an entire site not being up. And that Docker logs command is really your bread and butter when you're trying to debug and work with Docker containers, as well as those network commands I just mentioned. Now we can go ahead and fix that real quick and move it back to the correct password so our site will work again. Oh, whoops. And then Docker compose up. Oh, wait. Whoops. There we go. And it'll recreate the database. And once that's done, I want to introduce a command called docker exec. And what docker exec does, so if we go ahead and give it a quick refresh, now it works like it should. But if we do docker exec it standing for interactive, which means it'll open up a new shell for you through this command. And then the DB right here, that's the name of whatever container we want to interact with using this command. MySQL, oh wait, that will need a space. MySQL u root, and then p ghost. It'll ask us for a password. And what do you know? We just went straight into our MySQL container into the MySQL client. And we're allowed to do that with that docker exec command. And we can do stuff like we can say show databases if we want to. And, you know, that's all of our databases right there. But we're not really going to mess with anything because we do not need to, but it, and I just left and now I'm back in my Docker host again. We can change this. Instead of doing MySQL, we can just go into bash. And now we're in a bash prompt inside the Docker container that's running our database. Because remember, at the base of every container, usually, not always, it can be any operating system, but usually it's some type of Linux. In this case, it's going to be Alpine Linux because that's the most minimal type of Linux that there is that most containers are built off of. And I can do things like ls, cd, boot, and I can do all the stuff that you would normally do in Linux, although it's a lot more empty. And those types of commands is really what's going to make working with Docker a lot easier. And a huge advantage of that Docker logs command is that if, say, we're using something like a Minecraft server or Nextcloud, all those different things have their own way of reading logs. Like it might be a log file, there might be a special command you need to run to get logs. And Docker, it's always just going to be Docker logs that container name, and it'll give you the logs. It's very, very quick and very handy. And that's most of what I want to demonstrate real quick in this video. And as I said before, what you really want to stick to is this right here to learn more. And I wish you the best of luck on your Docker journey.